The morning of the hearing, my legs felt like they were made of stone, and I could barely breathe as I watched 28 years of marriage shrink into one courtroom door. My husband walked up to me in a brand new suit, leaned close enough for me to smell his cologne, and whispered, "Today is my best day. I'm taking everything from you," while the woman on his arm smirked like she already owned my life. Before my tears could fall, my lawyer touched my sleeve and murmured, "Did you do exactly what I told you?" And when I nodded, she said, "Good. The show starts now." And right then, I knew this divorce was about to turn into the worst day of his life. Thank you for watching. It means more to me than you know. And before I go on, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to picture your faces while I talk. My name is Dorothy. I'm from Iowa, and I never imagined I would be the kind of woman who had to learn strength in a courthouse hallway. When my lawyer said the show starts now, I didn't feel brave. I felt cracked open, but I also felt something else. A calm that came from months of quiet preparation, and from finally deciding I would not be erased. So I stood there, wiped my palms on my skirt, kept my eyes forward, and waited. Because I knew the truth was already in my folder, and it was about to speak for me. I kept my eyes forward, but my mind drifted back to the life that brought me here. Because you do not walk into a courtroom after 28 years without carrying a whole history in your chest. I met my husband when I was young and hopeful, back when we were renting a small place and counting every dollar. And I truly believed love meant we would always be a team. I worked, I cooked, I kept the bills paid, I did the bookkeeping when he started his business, and when our family needed something steady, I became the steady one without ever asking for applause. And somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing me as a partner and started seeing me as furniture, something useful, something quiet, something he thought he could replace and still keep the house standing. It did not happen all at once. That feeling of being replaced, it started in little ways that were easy to excuse when you've spent years making excuses for the person you love. He began to come home later, not smelling like the shop or the office, but like some sharp new cologne he never wore for me. And when I asked where he had been, his answers sounded practiced, like he was reading them off a card in his mind. His phone started living face down on the table. His screen would go dark the moment I walked into a room. And he would smile at it in a way that made my stomach tighten. Because it was the kind of smile that does not come from family. I told myself I was being foolish. I told myself marriage has seasons, but deep down I could feel it, like a draft under a closed door. Something was moving through my home that did not belong to us. That draft turned into a chill the day I opened our mail and saw a bank notice that did not match the life we were living. A balance change that was too big to be a mistake, too quiet to be normal, and too sudden to ignore. I remember standing in my kitchen with the paper trembling in my hands, the sink full of dishes, the afternoon light slanting across the floor, and my heart thumping like it was trying to warn me before my mind could catch up. When I asked him about it that night, I tried to keep my voice gentle. I tried to sound like a wife who simply needed clarity. But he snapped at me so fast, it was like I had touched a bruise. He said it was business, that I would not understand, and that I needed to stop watching every penny like some kind of watchdog. I wanted to remind him that I had watched every penny because I had to. Because there were years when we were building that business, and I was the one stretching groceries, paying bills on time, and making sure we never fell behind. But the look in his eyes told me something cruel. He did not respect that work anymore. He resented it. After that, little things started disappearing without leaving fingerprints. Money moved from one place to another. Small withdrawals here and there. A new credit card statement that arrived addressed only to him. And when I tried to ask again, he would laugh like I was being dramatic. Or he would sigh like I was a burden he had to manage. I lay awake beside him listening to his breathing, staring at the ceiling in the dark, thinking about every sacrifice I had made, and realizing the scariest part was not the cheating. The scariest part was the planning. Because a man who is planning will smile at you over dinner, kiss you on the forehead, and still set the match to your whole life. By the time I finally admitted the truth to myself, It was not a scream in my head, it was a quiet sentence that settled in my bones. He is not just leaving me, he is trying to leave me with nothing. And if I keep pretending not to see it, I will wake up one morning and find my name erased like it never belonged anywhere at all. I did not confront him right away, because something inside me knew that if I spoke too soon, he would simply hide deeper. So I watched quietly, and I listened. And I started noticing how he would dress up on ordinary Tuesdays, as if he had somewhere important to be. One evening, he said he had a late client meeting, and I drove past the little Italian restaurant near the highway, not because I wanted to catch him, but because my hands turned the wheel on their own. And there he was through the window, leaning forward like a young man again, laughing too freely, holding the hand of a woman who looked proud to be seen. I sat in my car with the heater running, and my throat tight, watching her touch his wrist like she belonged there. And I remember thinking how cruel it is that a person can build a whole life with you, then step outside of it, and act like the years were nothing but a coat he could take off. When they finally walked out, she glanced around and smiled like the world was applauding her, and he tucked her closer with the kind of care I had begged for in small ways for a long time. And in that moment, I felt something crack. Not loudly, but cleanly, like a thread snapping after being pulled too far. I went home and sat at my kitchen table until the clock changed numbers, and the more I replayed it, the more I understood the truth that made my stomach turn. He was not sneaking around like a guilty man. He was moving like a man who had already decided the story would end with him on top and me forgotten. By morning, I was not even shocked anymore. I was bruised and clear-headed, and I told myself that if he wanted to erase me, then I would stop begging to be seen, and I would start gathering what the truth always leaves behind, the paper trails, the patterns, and the proof. I started with one phone call, and I had to make it from the laundry room, because I could not trust my voice to stay steady if I stood in the same kitchen where I had cooked his meals for decades. My fingers shook so badly, I pressed the wrong number twice, and when I finally reached the office my friend had mentioned, I almost hung up, because part of me still wanted to believe I was overreacting, that love would fix what betrayal had broken. But the woman who answered spoke with a calm that felt like a hand on my back, and when I sat across from the lawyer a few days later, I did not bring anger first. I brought a folder, thin at the time, but heavy with the beginning of truth. She listened without interrupting, her eyes moving from my face to the documents and back again. And when I finished, she did not gasp, she did not pity me, she simply asked, very quietly, if my name was on any accounts, any deeds, any business papers, anything at all that proved I existed in the life we built. I told her yes, some things, and she nodded like she had been waiting for that. Then she leaned forward and said the words that became my anchor. Do not warn him. Do not accuse him. Do not let him know you are preparing, because a person who is already stealing will only steal faster when they feel the door closing. She gave me simple instructions. Gather statements, print what disappears, take photos of what changes, and write down dates like you are telling the truth to someone who has never met you. And when I left her office, my chest still hurt. But my fear had a shape now, and a shape can be held, measured, and fought. I went home and I became careful in a way I had never been before, not sneaky, just awake. Like a woman walking through her own house with the lights finally turned on. I bought a plain notebook, and I started writing down dates, the way he left, the way he returned, the excuses he used, and the little changes in his stories when he thought I was not paying attention. Because lies always trip over themselves when you keep listening. Every few days I checked the mail before he did, and when statements came in, I made copies. And when the statements stopped coming, I logged into the accounts, printed what I could, and saved it the way you save something precious. Not because it is beautiful, but because it can protect you. I found withdrawals that did not match our bills, transfers that did not match his income, and charges that made no sense at all for a man who claimed he was always at work, hotel rooms on nights he kissed me goodnight, restaurant tabs in neighborhoods he never took me to, and rides paid for at hours when he said he was asleep. At first I thought I might be imagining it, then I saw the pattern. And once you see a pattern, you cannot unsee it. Because the truth does not always arrive as a confession. Sometimes it arrives as math that refuses to add up. I looked through old files in the cabinet where I kept our records, and I found paperwork from years back when his business was still small. And there it was, my name on documents I had not thought about in ages, not just as a spouse, but as someone who had a stake, a signature, a place in the foundation. That discovery made me sit down right on the floor, because I realized he had been speaking like a king who owned the whole castle. But the bricks were not all in his name, and if he had forgotten that, then his confidence was built on a mistake. I kept gathering without letting it show on my face. I smiled at dinner. I asked normal questions. I folded his shirts, and it felt strange to play ordinary while my heart was learning a new language. The language of boundaries and proof. Some nights I cried in the bathroom with the faucet running, not because I was weak, but because grief needs somewhere to go. And after I wiped my face, I would step back into the hallway and remind myself that a woman can be hurting and still be precise. By the time my lawyer called to check on me, my folder was no longer thin. It was thick with receipts, copies, and notes, and I could feel something changing inside me, because I was no longer waiting for him to tell me who I was. I was building the case that would show the world he could not erase me. When the divorce papers finally came, they did not arrive with sadness. They arrived with arrogance, as if I was being served an eviction notice from a life I had paid into for nearly 3 decades. He did not even sit me down first. He did not ask for a conversation. He slid the envelope across the table and told me his lawyer would handle everything. Then he walked away like that was the respectful way to end a marriage. I remember staring at the words and feeling my cheeks burn, because the papers spoke about me like I was a minor detail, a dependent, a person who needed permission to breathe, and I could almost hear his voice inside those lines, rewriting history so it would favor him. A week later he started acting brand new, leaving the house dressed like he was on his way to a celebration, humming under his breath, and coming home with a softness in his step that he never brought to me. And that was when I understood he was not grieving, he was rehearsing his freedom. Then the woman appeared in places she had no business being, not hiding in shadows, but stepping into daylight, showing up at a local event with him as if she belonged beside his name, and the way she looked at me was not nervous or polite. It was bold, like she thought my seat was already hers. I did not scream, I did not cause a scene, because I could hear my lawyer's instructions in my head. Do not warn him. Do not tip your hand. Let him think he is ahead. And I held that advice like a rail while my insides shook. That night I drove to my lawyer's office and handed her the newest stack of evidence, and she flipped through it slowly. Then she looked up at me and said, "He is trying to paint you as nothing. So we are going to show the court exactly what you are. We are going to show them your work, your money, your signatures, your years." When I walked out of that office, the sky was dark and the air was cold, and I felt tired down to my bones. But underneath that tiredness was something steadier, a decision. Because I had spent too many years making a home for someone who was now trying to make me homeless, and I was done shrinking in my own story. In the weeks that followed, I moved through my days like someone carrying a secret weight. I still made coffee. I still answered the phone. I still nodded when neighbors asked how things were going. But inside I was counting, measuring, remembering. Because now I knew every small detail could become a lifeline. My husband kept acting like the outcome was already written. He would talk loudly on purpose. He would mention lawyers and money as if he was performing for an audience. And every time he did, I saw how certain people become cruel when they think you have no way to defend yourself. I did not argue with him. I did not beg him. I let him mistake my silence for surrender. And that was harder than people understand because silence can feel like swallowing fire. But I was not trying to win an argument. I was trying to protect the years I had poured into that marriage. Some evenings I sat at my dining table with my papers spread out in front of me, bank statements beside receipts, dates beside notes, and I would stare until my eyes blurred, not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed the truth to be clean, clear and undeniable when it mattered most. The night before the hearing, I barely slept. I laid there listening to the quiet of my house, thinking about the first day we moved in, thinking about holidays and hard winters, thinking about all the times I chose peace over being right, and I realized how dangerous it is to confuse peace with permission. In the morning, I dressed slowly. I smoothed my blouse with hands that still wanted to shake. And I told myself that whatever happened, I would not let anyone speak over my life like I was not there. Because I had been there for every bill, every sacrifice, every late-night worry. And I deserved to be seen. When I met my lawyer outside, she did not give me a long speech. She just looked at me with those sharp eyes, steady and sure. And in that quiet moment, I felt my spine straighten. Because I finally understood that dignity is not something someone gives you. It is something you decide to keep. We walked into the courthouse together, and the air inside felt different, heavy and polished, like the building itself had absorbed years of other people's heartbreak and stored it in the walls. I tried to focus on my breathing, slow in, slow out, because my heart was racing, and I could feel that old habit in me, the habit of making myself small so someone else could feel big. And I had to fight it with every step. In the lobby, he appeared like he was arriving at an award ceremony, shoulders back, chin lifted, a new suit that fit like confidence. And the woman beside him held onto his arm with a tight little smile that made my skin prickle. He walked straight up to me, too close. Close enough that I caught that expensive cologne again, and he said it softly, like he wanted the words to be mine alone. Today is my best day. I am taking everything from you, the house, the savings, even the dog. And he smiled like he had already signed the papers. For a second, I felt my eyes sting, because cruelty hurts in a special way when it comes from someone who once promised to protect you. But before my face could give me away, my lawyer brushed my sleeve and leaned in. She asked me, "Did you do exactly what I told you?" And I nodded, because I had done it all. Every copy, every printout, every date written down while my hands shook. And she gave a small, calm smile. "Good," she whispered. "The show starts now." And in that moment I stopped hearing his voice as a threat, and started hearing it as a mistake he was making out loud. Because he truly believed I had nothing, and he did not realize the truth was already walking into that courtroom with us. Inside the courtroom, everything felt colder, not in temperature, but in the way people looked straight ahead, like feelings were not allowed to breathe in a place built for decisions. He sat on the other side with that same confident posture, and his girlfriend settled beside him like she had already moved into my life. Her mouth curled in that smug little smile that made my hands itch to shake, but I kept them folded in my lap. His lawyer stood first, smooth and practiced, and talked about me like I was an unpaid extra in his story, a woman who stayed home, a woman who depended on him, a woman who should be grateful for whatever he decided to leave behind. I listened without reacting, because I had learned that some people count on your emotions to make you look unstable, and I refused to give them that gift. When my lawyer rose, she did not raise her voice, she did not put on a show, she simply walked to the front with a folder that looked ordinary. And then she began to speak like truth had a spine. She started with dates, clear and simple, and as she spoke, she handed the judge documents that matched every sentence. Bank statements showing transfers that happened after the marriage began to crack, withdrawals that did not match bills, and expenses that had nothing to do with our household. Then she showed proof of my work, the bookkeeping records, the emails, the signatures, the entries that carried my handwriting through years of building. And she made it impossible to pretend I had contributed nothing. My husband shifted in his seat the first time the judge looked down at a statement and then looked back up at him. And I saw the smallest change in his face, like confidence trying to hold on while the floor underneath it started to move. My lawyer turned to the next section, and that is when the girlfriend's smile began to fade, because the evidence stopped being numbers and became pictures, hotel charges, receipts for gifts, a lease payment traced back to our joint account, and a trail so clear it felt almost embarrassing to watch him try to sit still. The judge's expression tightened, not loud, not dramatic, just focused. And the room went so quiet, I could hear paper shifting as my lawyer placed one more document down, the one that showed my name still attached to half the business shares he had been bragging about owning alone. For the first time, he did not look like a man winning. He looked like a man realizing he had told the wrong lie to the wrong people. And even from across the room, I could see his throat working as if he had swallowed something too big to hide. And when the judge finally spoke, slow and careful, asking him to explain why marital money was being spent on an outside relationship, while he was demanding the house and the savings from me, the girlfriend stopped smirking completely and stared straight ahead like she suddenly wished she had stayed invisible. My husband tried to answer, but his words sounded thin in that quiet room. Because the documents did not argue, they simply existed, and the more he spoke, the more it became clear he had built his confidence on a story the evidence could not support. The judge asked a few more questions, steady and direct, and with each one, his posture fell a little, like a suit that suddenly did not fit, while the woman beside him kept her eyes forward, stiff and silent, as if she finally understood she was not watching a victory, she was watching a reckoning. When the judge finished, the decision came with a firmness that made my knees go weak. Spousal support ordered, the house staying with me, my car staying with me, and the financial games he played counted against him, not in my favor, but in the favor of plain truth. Outside the courtroom he glared like I had stolen something from him, and he hissed that I set him up, but I looked him right back and told him, no. You set this up the day you decided I was disposable. I only brought the truth into the right room. Walking to my car, I felt tired and sore inside, but taller too, because for the first time in years I did not shrink when he spoke, and that was a kind of freedom no settlement could ever fully explain. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end. It means a lot. And if this story touched you, please subscribe so you do not miss the next one.